My name is Sonia Michelle, and I'm Director of U.S. Studies, and it's been a great pleasure to organize this conference with my colleague Haleh Asfandiari, and to bring together, because of our combined contacts and networks, it's been possible to bring together two remarkable groups of women to talk about women in entrepreneurship in this comparative perspective. And I think already from the last panel, it was beginning to be evident how useful that comparison is, that there are many commonalities that women are addressing in both regions, but there are also differences, and I think it's a very productive comparison. One of the things that came up in the last panel, and we're going to really be able to expand on here, is the importance of networks of outside organizations, of various other resources that are available to women in trying to become entrepreneurs. And everybody on the last panel said that they themselves participated in various organizations outside. But in addition to the kinds of things that they themselves have been very active in those, in addition to those organizations, there are many freestanding organizations by women that have been started by women who may have a background in entrepreneurship or in other areas, and their express purpose is to help other women become entrepreneurs. And so we have here on this panel a variety of women who are working on this from different perspectives. In the interest of saving time, because we did run over our coffee break a little bit, I'm just going to identify them because you do have their bios in front of you, and it's not possible in a brief time to do justice to all of their many accomplishments. But I think that what each of them was probably going to do is talk a little bit about their own personal experience as entrepreneurs when that's relevant, or other experience that they've had, and then about their organizations and what they're able to do for women. So we're going to go in the order listed on the agenda, starting with Elizabeth Vasquez, who is the CEO of We Connect International. And as in the, a couple of things. As in the previous panel, everybody will have 15 minutes, and I will be monitoring that closely. If you have a cell phone on, please turn it off. This program is being webcast live, and when people have their cell phones on, even if they're on pause or silent or whatever, it interferes with the broadcast. So that was some of the static we were getting before. So please turn them off if you have them on. Also, just to note, at the end of this panel, we'll move right to the closing remarks by Tammy Longaberger, and right after that, we'll have the privilege of, we have a bookseller available outside with copies of Tammy's book available for sale, and I'm sure she'd be delighted to sign them for you. So just to keep that in mind. So, Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers. This is a wonderful event. I've learned so much already, and it's great to see some old friends and some new friends. I'm the CEO and co-founder of We Connect International. It is a 501c3 nonprofit that was created by a bunch of very large corporations that in the United States had programs to buy from women-owned businesses. And they realized that as multinational corporations, by definition, they are sourcing from all over the world, and that it's good business practice to be more inclusive in their sourcing practices. So if women are making the majority of consumer decisions, and you don't have any women business owners in your value chain selling to you products and services, you're not going to be very relevant for very long. And so We Connect International was created at the end of 2009. We're active in India, China, Europe, South America, and increasingly other markets as our corporations get more and more excited about what they learn about the potential of women-owned businesses as vendors. Right now we represent about $700 billion in annual purchasing power. So the question is, how can we influence just 1% of that purchasing power, which would translate into about $7 billion that would be spent on women-owned businesses every year, and how do we increase that? So it's an exciting time to have not just the supply of women-owned businesses getting organized, but also the demand for their products and services getting organized. But it can't be done alone. The women themselves have to be made aware of the potential, the reason to shift from the informal sector to the formal sector, or to create a business, or to grow a business. And So I think the opportunity here is to share a little bit about my personal experience in trying to address the issues, the obstacles. I think that Hanan did a brilliant job of going into very great detail all the answers to the questions. So I don't want to waste too much time repeating it. But I think the two issues that keep coming up in terms of growing women-owned businesses is access to knowledge and access to networks. And I just like to keep things simple. For me, it's an easier framework. How do we increase the access to knowledge women have and the access to networks women have? Because therein, women have the power. And if they have more access to those two issues, they really can change the world. But they're not going to do it alone, so we have to quit talking to ourselves and also include more men in this conversation. They really can be very helpful, especially the men I get to work with who are responsible for billions of dollars of purchasing of products and services. They get it. And so now our job as a community is to get better organized and present ourselves in a way that blows them away and that makes them want to buy more and more and more of the stuff that we're producing, which is very innovative. It's usually very cost effective, and it has huge value add. In terms of the advantages to growing your own firm, again, that's already been addressed by, I think, Tammy and Lena. Owning your own business is always risky. The chance of failure is higher than the chance of success. That's just a statistical fact. And yet, we keep doing it because the rewards are so significant to control your own destiny and to meet a need in the market that right now isn't being met effectively. And so I think we have both an opportunity as women and a responsibility to provide more innovative, more sustainable solutions to the challenges this world face, and they're significant. And I think women working with men really can address those challenges and make this world a better place. In terms of organizations, there are so many. There are thousands of organizations out there doing amazing work on behalf of women of all different types of backgrounds and men. Some of the ones that we work with are Business and Professional Women International, FCAM, the Femme Chef Entreprise Mondiale. So they have members of women business owner associations all over the world, and they're connecting them through FCAM. Women Presidents Organization. These are multi-million-dollar women-owned businesses that are, really changing the way the public perceives what a woman-owned business is. Vital Voices is doing fantastic work in bringing together a lot of these really fantastic local women-owned businesses into networks, business networks in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Latin America. Local associations at the grassroots level. They may not have a loud voice, but organizations we work with, like the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, are just doing a brilliant job of bringing those at the base of the pyramid that have the least amount of resources but the greatest amount of need for access, again, to that knowledge and to those networks so that they can provide a sustainable income, because they're providing a competitive product and service that's meeting the needs of the market. And I think for too long, we've been focused on the supply side. What is it women enjoy doing? What is it women are good at? And that's important, right? You can't have a successful business if you're not passionate about what you're offering to the world. Having said that, it's not going to last for very long if you're not meeting the demands of the market. And so by focusing on what is it the world wants, what is it the world needs, where is this $57 trillion economy at? And more importantly, where is this $57 trillion economy going, right? How do we anticipate the needs of the market, and how do we meet those needs? By doing that, again, we really can change the world. And I don't want to leave out the MENA Business Women's Network. I just think you're doing brilliant work, and I have such respect, and you've been doing it for a long time very successfully. As well as trade, more traditional trade and industry groups, chambers of commerce. So it doesn't have to be a woman's focused group for you to get involved and really leverage and benefit and play a leadership role in these key organizations. In terms of public policy, I think there's been some fantastic work done for many years on the issues of education and training, access to finance, but there's very little that's been done, in my opinion, effectively on the issue of access to markets. How do you enable, okay, it's one thing to help women get started, it's another thing to help them grow through access to education, training, access to finance. But at the end of the day, if women don't have access to markets to compete for contracts, it's a whole lot of effort with not a whole lot of return. So we, in addition to all that work that's being done, we have to also start thinking more strategically about access to markets. And so in terms of public policy and what can the government itself do to make a huge difference, we haven't done it very well in the United States, but unfortunately we're one of the only countries outside of South Africa that has policies in place to source from women-owned businesses specifically. Now, it's not a policy, it's more of a goal, but we'll take what we can get. And we've never met that 5% goal, by the way. But what is it governments themselves can do to buy from their own people and invest in those people? So if women are driving change and SMEs are the engine of growth, and that's where job creation happens and economic prosperity and community development, if that's true, then how much of our public money in our countries is actually being spent on women? And if women provide a higher return when they receive wealth, when they create jobs, if they do a better, more efficient, more effective job of creating real economic prosperity because of the way they give back to their communities, because of the way they employ people, because of how they invest in areas of health and children and food and nutrition and education, if that has a higher rate of return for economic prosperity and community development, how much of our money as public taxpayers, regardless of what country you're in, how much of that money is going to be spent on women? Not just policy, $1 million project here and $1 million project there. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Governments are the largest single purchaser of products and services in almost any country, and we constantly ask them, what policy are you going to use to help women, receive more access to technology or access to education? But how much of the money itself is directly being spent so that we can create wealth, so that women can own more of the means of production, so that they have more say in how their lives shift from where we are now to where we could be, not because women themselves are necessarily inherently better, but because, again, of the way we invest in our girls and in our boys. And then finally, I think we need to also focus in on ourselves and take responsibility and not wait for the government, not wait for corporations. But women, we have such significant purchasing power, and we really don't realize the power for us to change the world just by simply being more thoughtful in how we spend our money. If we took ownership for the fact that we make 85% of the consumer decisions at the household level and started making sure that at least some of that money went to women or went to organizations or corporations that invest their money and their time and resources into women, if we just decided ourselves that we wanted to change the world and make it a more equitable, more prosperous, more sustainable environment, if we did that and we made that conscious decision, this is something we can do in our lifetime. We don't have to set it up for our daughters and our sons to do it for us. This is something we can do in our lifetime, and it's very real, and it's not rocket science, and it's not hard. We just have to be thoughtful about how we use our purchasing power. So I think that's a summary of my experience and what I feel is the power of these types of discussions and conversations. More importantly, what we do after we leave this room.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now we're going to turn to Leila Eskandar, who is the chairperson of CID Consulting in Egypt and is also very active in organizations helping women.
Okay. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you, Woodrow Wilson team. And thank you, Nadra, old friend. and really happy to be with some Arab sisters. I just come from Cairo, bidding you hello from a revolution that has unseated a 30-year dictator. We would like you to celebrate the event with us. So Cairo, back there. A daunting city of 17 million. The business I'm in, CID Consulting, is to find solutions that bring the poorest of the poor into a business relationship with the rich. Before I started the company in 1995, I had been an NGO operative and for years had been writing proposals and getting money very successfully, but had not seen much impact. In 1988, I started a social enterprise for women in the garbage collectors neighborhood of Cairo. They collect half of Cairo's waste, that is 7,000 tons every day. Every day. They bring it to their homes because they live in a shanty town, and they sort and recycle. And that horror, I was there as a teacher, teaching kids how to read and write. But the enterprise around this just struck me. I said, my God, they're making money. Why am I wasting my time writing proposals and going to donors? I need to be a little smarter at getting to markets. Just what Elizabeth said. What is it that we have? So what you call waste in America in the North is a misnomer, and we beg of you to listen to us. It's not waste. It's materials. It's a commodity. It's money. Every time you walk by a big black bag on the sidewalk that some truck will haul and compact, think of, they're taking away green dollar bills, because that's exactly what they're doing. But it's done in a labor-intensive, not very high-tech way. They come to our doorstep. Look at this luxury. Door to door, not building to building, collection every day. Armies of people. They used to be on donkey cart, now they're on trucks. Okay, it's not always a beautiful scene. And this is where they live. 5 neighborhoods around Cairo, 120,000 people. Policy implications? Well, sorry, Nedra, but the World Bank and others are supporting the multinationals to come and contract for the waste of our cities. To do what with? To landfill. Is that possible? So, networks. After years of working on the issue of small projects and helping women make a little money, a lot, £3 million a year. In fact, for 500 women, we decided, hey, this is for the birds. We've got to get into the policy and form a global network and talk to the World Bank. On the 31st, we're doing that right here in Washington. But this is how they do it, you know. They bring it home, they sort it. I will not show you the horror of it. The first step, which is the horror of horrors, I never show that. Because it's a lot of women sitting around a pile of mixed petrified waste and painstakingly going through it with a fine-tooth comb because they have to make money. Then it goes on to plastics being sorted and paper. Paper goes into 6 streams, and the women do the same work as men. Paper goes into 6, 12 goes into, plastics goes into 12, metals and others and so on. So here's what I realized they knew. They stockpile when prices are low. These guys are not idiots. They watch the market. They sell when prices are high and wait until the right price. But of course, in order to do that, they have to suffer this. All right, this unseemly horror is not seen by our municipal people and our authorities because they just see the dirt. They don't see the business in it. But what I was able to do, because, you know what, I had come to the United States for 10 years. I lived here as a U.S. citizen and had gone back with, I'd been liberated from my cultural biases. And so was able to see the beauty in the dirt. The business beauty, I mean, you know. They were making money. None of them was standing in lines getting subsidized bread or asking for the church to help them. Sure, there's child labor. Ugly. What do we do about it? It's a long, slow process, but you set them up in SMEs, you teach them at the machine how to operate it and fix it and so on. What's the alternative? It is to bury or landfill. So here's the value chain. How many jobs do we create for boys, men, after the women sort? 7 jobs for every ton of waste. So if a city produces 14,000 tons, how dare we, as policymakers, how dare we take away these jobs? You know how we dare? Because we don't count them in GDP. And here again is another policy implication. we need to start counting GDP and talking about growth, economic growth in a different way. Jobless growth will not do, okay? And to look at GDP without counting the informal sector will not do either. It's just like not counting women working in the home. It's the same issue. So there are a lot of policy issues here, and in order to raise them to a level of debate where we have a voice, we have to join networks. Because, okay, well, I set up the first enterprise successfully with a bunch of women. That was great. But when you talk about policy, you have to get into networks. The picture here shows it all blue plastic. Now, that was not an accident. That's because there were 4 steps before that that took it from mixed household waste to plastic and the main components to blue plastic, to high density and low density, to polyethylene, polypropylene, to export oriented, and we send it to Shanghai. Then another bunch of people buy it and wash it. Another bunch of people buy it and cut it. Another bunch of people buy it and granulate it. And this is white gold. PET, your mineral water bottles, are a very expensive commodity. Every time you throw one in the trash, tell yourself, there are hundreds of people who are going to make money out of this. Please feel guilty. I want to lay a guilt trip on you because the way we look at materials has become so disrespectful. And the most humbling thing I've learned is to forget my PhD from Columbia and to learn from these illiterate people who know so much more than we do. Number one, humility, to learn from them. And then, sure, I did learn a few things. So why not merge the two worlds and eliminate the health hazards and upgrade the industry and integrate the education into it and do the little business things. So now we're part of a global network of waste workers. They call them waste pickers. In Cairo, they're not pickers, by the way. They've been collecting from homes. They have a relationship with households for donkey's years now, 60. In other parts of the world, they are pickers. They scavenge and this and that. But for people to call these people waste pickers or to look at them as people who aren't worthy of counting in GP is really ridiculous because they are entrepreneurs. So when a multinational comes in and says, I'm going to bring you on board as employees, they say, hell no. We want to be entrepreneurs. We don't want to punch in and punch out. But I'm going to give you health insurance. I will give you social insurance, work insurance. No, 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 no. I want to run my own business. Why is that so hard for us to understand when the poor say it? This is really sinful of us. So here are the boys who would have gone without money, without hope, life, and probably would have gone on drugs, okay? But what do we get from policymakers, locally and internationally? Alternatives that are totally unsuited to our reality. Landfilling. Why? Because they have commercial interests. They have, now all this stuff is banned in Europe. The new EU directives have prevented landfilling. So where do we go, we commercial vendors? So it's pitting one private sector group against another private sector group. Who wins in the end? The one with the money. Okay? So networks have become so important for us because if we're going to fight these big boys, we're going to have to speak with one voice globally. The other part of the gold is the organic compost. Now, you people have taught the world to use chemical fertilizers. Is that so good? When are we going to start respecting the knowledge of what we call underdeveloped third world people? So she's not sorting, but this is how it starts, and then it goes on. And the trucks that came in with the multinationals, this was their big spin on how they were going to clean Cairo. But look at the state of the city. This is how Cairo looks after 7 years of multinational service. Because they didn't understand us, they stopped door to door, and they allowed us to live in filth. So what was the enterprise? 1988. I'd been there for 6 years. I'd just come back from Berkeley. And I had been teaching at Los Altos High School in Silicon Valley for a very fast-track bunch of kids. You can imagine, Silicon Valley. And our program was individualized instruction. We weren't going to hold anybody back. Everybody had to go top speed at their own pace. Now, when I came to this place, there were people who trickled in all day from the collection route. Children were used in collecting. They went out at dawn, came back at 9, and you can say, sorry, you're late, or you couldn't be on the same page every day of the lesson. So I said, wow, Los Altos High School is going to move to this place, and we started an individualized instruction program for illiterate kids who went out on donkey carts. Years later, they were too old to go out because they had become adolescents, and it's dangerous to let a girl out. We are Upper Egyptians from the south, very traditional, conservative, so we said, we have to do something for the girls. The boys are all going to the machines, the ones I just showed you. But the girls, there's nothing. So here was the idea. If they sort the mixed, horrible waste that comes from my home in a group on the floor, why not sort something beautiful? And the answer was the most beautiful cotton in the world, Egyptian cotton. So we went to the textile industry and asked them to give us their rags as a donation. We said, please don't give us money. We're not poor people. We're entrepreneurs. But we just want you, instead of throwing your trash, entre guillemets, we want you to give it to us. That's your donation. And we set up a learning and enterprising way that copied the home. Okay? But here we were learning to tell what was synthetic fibers and what was pure cotton, and the colors, the full range of colors, and then an enterprise around the basic machine. Weaving is an ancient, traditional Egyptian craft, but our traditional villages use a loom that has 13 warps and 8 wefts, and it's really complicated. This was just 2, and what we produced first was rag rugs. How to export, how to get to the market. You had to have quality. And our first partners, I'm sorry to say, were only the Fair Trade Network. So, but then again, the importance of getting into a network. Why the Fair Trade? Because I don't know if Tammy does that. I hope you don't. I used to spend every vacation in the States. I used to come twice a year, carrying a bag full of my samples. And every time I was told the same thing. I went to Christmas tree shops, to Pier 1 Imports, to Macy's, every one of them. They said, you can't compete with the Asians. Why? Said, because they're selling it for dirt. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not here to make a deal to exploit my people. Go ahead, exploit the Indians and Asians. I'm sorry, we are arrogant Egyptians. We're not going to accept low price. So here's another policy issue. We as American consumers want to continue to go to Pier 1 and buy it for nothing. We don't stop to think what that means to the producer. You buy it, the wholesalers, for nothing, and it doesn't transform anybody's life. And we can afford to pay 10 times more for it. Are we willing? What we have now, long story, but I don't want to run out of time. It's a huge enterprise, 500 women making £3 million, and they went from being illiterate entrepreneurs to people who now export, they ship, they send emails, they do the inventory, they pay, they have this pay the salary. We produce a whole range of products. The range is our curriculum because it runs like a school, and we've been written up. We have received prizes. We're on UNESCO's, and then after the rags, we did the paper. It's all handicrafts, it's all labor intensive, and it's all for women. But what I want to show you is just so you get an idea of the value chain, because really what this whole thing is about is value chain. We talk a lot about it, but this is household trash, what you call trash, household materials. It comes in as organic, non-organic. The first step is sorting it into organic, and then the organic goes to composting. The manual. Now look at how many products you have created from one basic activity called sorting, but it has to be manual sorting, because I've visited so many, and then here in the States we couldn't be bothered with these menial jobs, so we mush it all up and we granulate it, and then we invent technologies to separate it after it has become a powder. Okay, if that suits your economy, fine. But please don't shove it down my throat. My people are 40% illiterate. Stay away from my shores, is what we're saying right now. But anyway, so these are the basic items, about 4 or 5, and then every single one goes through a resorting, and every single step of that creates jobs. That's how come you have at least 7 jobs for every ton of materials. So after all this is done and you have manually sorted, it goes to trade. There's a whole traders at every step. let me take you through one of these items that I showed you. Actually, one sub hard plastic, because there's hard and soft and high density, low density. It's sorted by type and by shape, manually. And we smell it, we know it. And then it's sold. But then if I have enough money and I can wait, I can do a little more sorting. Between the 4 steps here, there are jobs that are created. I can sell or I can keep. And every time there's a trader. If I keep, it means I have more space, more investment, more money to wait. I wash, sell to a trader. Then he sells to someone else. That someone else crushes, granulates. Then he sells. And then sells to another one. He pelletizes. So that's one sub type of this thing called plastic. That's what value chain is all about. And every time a compaction truck is imported into the country and comes in to handle our what they call waste, it destroys livelihoods. Livelihoods that are not respected enough because they're not high-tech. Years later, we survey our neighborhood. Now, in CID Consulting, what we do is we survey that sector every 4 years. It's like the Slum Dwellers International Network. Every so many years, they survey their neighborhoods, so they call it enumeration. They find out how many of us slum dwellers live in these neighborhoods and how many of us are willing to move into one building and have a communal toilet and how many want to say Enumeration is what they call it. But what we found, and this is not counted anywhere in government documents, is it grows at a rate of 40% every year. SMEs. Small and medium enterprises, and we have a whole bunch of data on the capital they invest, the markets, the partners, the revenues they generate, the technology they use, the people they employ, the networks, trading networks, the amount of materials they suck out of the waste stream. Long story, but this is what we do at CID Consulting. We're now in big battle because we're talking to the new government and saying, you know what, these multinational contracts were all corrupt. Please, we're going to take you to court. And we can do that now, happily.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a fascinating account. We're now going to turn to Mary Morehouse, who is the Director of Special Projects at the Business and Professional Women's Foundation in the U.S.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here, having me here. This has been a very exciting day. And I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and Business and Professional Women's Foundation and what we do. It's a little bit different than some of the things you've heard. I've spent about my whole career, about the last 30 years, in workforce training and development. So I've always been looking at working with populations, starting with young people, displaced young people, drug addicts, dropouts, in looking at how they need to be brought into the system, into training, into education, into looking, mostly it's been all focused around employment. So it's all about jobs. And I've been very blessed over the last many years and worked with a number of companies, the National Retail Federation. I've actually worked for myself as a self-employed contractor for about 27 years. And I got to that point because I got laid off twice, and I said it will never happen again. If I'm going to be my own worst enemy, then I'm going to have to deal with myself through all of it. So I thought I will always work for people because any job you have, you're working for somebody. And so I stayed in the field of working in employment and training and worked with a trade association, National Retail Federation, looking at, in this country, we do not have a system of credentialing people like many other countries have for lower level jobs. So if you look in Europe, in England, Australia, any number, and it's amazing for an industrialized country as we are. But in this country, in its wisdom, at one point, decided that we should look at that. We should look at developing certifications for people at lower end jobs, like in the retail industry, and which was especially interesting because in retail and hospitality, 45% of young people start their jobs there. That's where they start, whatever their career is going to be. The Retail Federation decided that they wanted to hold on to those people because as many of them leave, there's a high turnover. long story short, we got involved with working with developers because we were showing companies, and this was both developers and major retail corporations, that it was cheaper for them to invest in their employees than it was to continue to hire people because at the lower levels, retail is, we call it the tissue paper economy, where, you just, somebody comes in, you throw it away. So we were looking at developing careers. Did that for about 15 years and began to, and looked at developing standards in this country for credentialing. So that we could, people in lower healthcare parts of the industry, because healthcare is the most regulated credentialed industry in the country, which probably is in other countries as well. But really looking at how could we build people's capacity and then get them incentivized to continue going on to training. Hoping that, of course, a lot of people would then move on to whatever they wanted, including their own businesses and entrepreneurship. For the last several years, I've been working with an organization called Business and Professional Women's Foundation, which I think has been my calling and training for all those other things I did. Really brought me to a place where it's very exciting in looking at women and their needs to advance in their workplace, advance in the economy, taking a look at Bpw Foundations, actually 55 years old. The parent organization started in 1919 as one of the first women's organizations in the country. So interestingly enough, our average age of our members is about 70. Because in that time, a lot of different organizations have come along, but there's still a strong group out there that really look, again, they work in their community, they look to do things for women, whether it's through scholarships and also informing public policy as best they can. Bpw Foundation's been around for about 55 years. We do look for policy opportunities to advance policy for women in the workplace. Pay Equity Day is coming up in April for those who we call it one of our non-celebration days because of and we encourage women to go out and get together and network and look at lamenting the fact that they make 77 cents to the dollar for male earnings. But it's a day we recognize and we continue to fight for pay equity, sick leave, things like that for women. Our philosophy is, and what we look for, are advancing women and building successful workplace by working with companies to look at the value of diversity and inclusion, social responsibility, and in many cases volunteering. So how do we work with companies to make their workplaces, and we know that diversity in workplaces, bringing women in high positions, the productivity in companies change, it increases, there's great value to women coming in. So part of it is our educating companies and showing them the value of that, and also we've created sort of a successful workplace checklist for them to look at. And women, as companies get a little smarter and realize that women are 85% of the expenditures, and certainly Walmart never got that part very early, did it? But to really begin to look at how do you make it work on both sides. So that's what Bpw Foundation tries to do. We also spend a good deal of time, and we're working right now, we just had, in looking at target populations and how can we advance certain women in certain groups. There are two populations, actually three we're looking at right now, and one of them is women veterans. Veterans in this country, and I don't know how they are in other countries, but we treat them pretty bad. I mean, we think that people will come back from wars and from serving their country and God knows where, or whatever disasters, and they're just going to jump right back into their skin as they were at home. Women are especially vulnerable to the problems that face them when they come home. And we had a national summit in the fall, really looking at bringing women veterans together. And I'm saying this because we've learned that about 25% of veterans, when I'm going to speak to the women, want to be entrepreneurs. They just don't know, they don't have access, they don't, all the issues you've talked about, the education, the access to money. But what we find with them is it's also a huge part of confidence, which I think it's another issue with women. Confidence, with education comes confidence. But we've learned that women veterans, we did a study in 2007 for about 1,600 of them responded. And we looked at what are their transition issues into employment. And we just found that the issues of childcare, family responsibilities, they come back from service and the family says, oh, mom's home, here's the kid. There's no time, and I think, Tammy, you brought it up in terms of who am I in this process? And you imagine coming back from service and looking at where do I want to be, what do I need? Women come back to 4 or 5 major roles, and we talked about them without sort of splitting them all out, but they're the expectations of spouses, family members, community members, the social fulcrum of the family, and then what about me and my employment issues and sustaining my family. Many of them are single women, mothers coming back. A lot of women have entered the service because they had issues. They wanted to get away from things at home. I'm not saying men don't do that, but women particularly go in. They fight to be equal, and then they come home. And the interesting thing, as we've learned, is that the U.S. military is the #1 employer for equity in pay. Because once you leave the military, in your grade, you have no grades and levels, then you enter the real world, and women soon find that there's very little equity in pay. So not to belabor the women veteran, but because what's very close to our heart right now, we just came out with a report on our summit, and really looking at, and it's so similar to other things, when I look at in-need populations, I don't care who you are, they don't know they have benefits. They don't even know they're veterans, some of them. If they haven't been in war, they don't think they're veterans, which is really sad. And we had a panel of women talking about that. There's no gender-specific services. It's only in the last few years that they have prosthetic devices for women in the military. I mean, imagine wearing men's shoes all the time for many, many years. That's changing. So I'm not going to belabor how I could trash the VA, but just really getting to that, the surge in women in the military, which is now up to 15%. They're 8% of the veterans. There's going to be about 150,000 women coming out of the service over the next few years. These are all young women. Okay, so what's the first thing they do when they come back and they have children? They won't ask for help. We find women living in cars. We don't even have a good definition of homeless, because if you're not reported in the streets or whatever, if you're staying in a friend's house, you're living on a couch. There was a woman who could just make this is the best story in our from our summit. She went into the service. She went over to Afghanistan. She had top secret clearance. She was working at a command center, and she was in charge of the communication systems. She came home. She had 2 children. She went to the employment office, and they said, none of these skills really transfer. They said you could be a waitress or a file clerk. And she was like, her heart sank. So she got a job as a waitress because she had to work for her children. She didn't have enough money for housing, but she had enough money for food. And she didn't want to go for help because she's afraid she'd lose her children. And there's a lot of women out there. In terms of government policy, because I know we're supposed to cover a lot of things, there are areas where, we have homeless shelters for women, but they can't get in because they don't meet the criteria, or they're not sick enough to get into something else. So anyway, in terms of looking at women's needs, the other population we're looking at is older women. You talk about women who want to start their own businesses, not ready to retire. Older women are getting, and I have it right in my own family. My sister was just laid off because she was older. Of course, they didn't say that. She had some illnesses. Their insurance rates went up, and she went and they hired someone for half the price of her. So, sure, she has some recourse, but the reality is she's not ready to retire. She can't afford it. Can she do her own thing? Well, maybe. So we're looking at women, older women, and looking at their potential opportunities in the green economy. So it's another area I want to just talk 2 seconds about, is looking at an industry that's not gender specific yet. It's very interesting when you think about it, because the green economy sort of spreads across industries, but nobody's identified it except for the industry itself, so construction or LEED certifications or things you probably have to deal with in some of your things. But older women have a lot of skills. They don't know how to that's the other thing we don't do well, is we don't know how to help people look at what their skill sets are to transition into something new. whether that's their own business or whether that's, I really always wanted to do this and I'd like to go there. I don't think I can. Like this woman who was in charge of communication systems. I'm sure there's something in technology we could do for her. So my point being, looking at all these issues that women face and giving them the choice. So moving into entrepreneurship, which a lot of people may be interested in, but they just don't even know how to look at themselves. So how do we look at some public policy, what are some of the public policy issues? And you mentioned a few organizations. We have the Small Business Administration in this country. There are now women's centers. There's about 100 of them, and what I've heard is that they have longer hours and they have childcare services, so that makes them women's centers. And they're in nonprofit organizations. They're not at colleges where the regular SBDCs are, small business development corporations. We also do have requirements. You mentioned it, Elizabeth, the 5% for government contracts to go to women. We're at about 3%, but that 2% is billions and billions of dollars. The U.S. is the largest consumer in the world, the U.S. government, in the world. So there is a whole lot of opportunity out there for products, services to be sold to this government. We're working on a survey now for women in technology, just sort of an online survey, which is biased to begin with, right? High-speed technology. And about 25% of the 1,400 women who responded from around the country said they wanted to, in using high-speed technology, what they really want to do is expand their businesses. And where is the access? We're looking at women who have trouble with access. They don't understand the technology. You'll see now AT&T has this new education program online for people who want to learn more about technology. So what I'm saying is as these technologies are growing too, and women can get in on the forefront if we let them know it's there, if they have access. A couple other things I'll just mention in terms of the public policy area. The lending practices in terms of loosening things up in helping women entrepreneurs get started. The whole broadband technology and equal access, whether that's flexibility in getting equipment. We saw that about 10% of our survey takers actually go to the library, which I think is great. And that's really, talk about really drive to find out what you need. Mentoring is the other big thing. We're starting something, we're looking for 100,000 women mentors to look at working with women veterans and women military wives, assuming that most of the spouses are wives. But the whole mentoring piece, and that's also in business, in the supplier chain, where how do we have companies that mentor small businesses to help them move on as part of their supplier chain and continue to give back and grow. So I was a little bit all over the board, so I was trying to give you something a little bit different because we are different. So I will end there and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, our final speaker is Nora Al-Manai, who is the Deputy Project Director of Enterprise Qatar.
Hi, my name is Nora Manai. I'm a Project Director of Enterprise Qatar. And I want to talk today about the resources of entrepreneurship in Qatar. And the topic is about the Middle East. And we've seen three of entrepreneurs, ladies, who have managed their own programs or initiatives in different countries, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt. And I come from Qatar, which is a different market from the Gulf area. And even within the Gulf area, we have so many differences between each country. In Qatar, I will give you an example or some idea about Qatar. I'm sure most of you have heard about Qatar. We are 1.8 population, 1.8 million. 20% of the population are Qataris, which is almost 300,000. The highest GDP per capita and no unemployment problem. So why should women become entrepreneurs? This is a very interesting topic with the government, and we have Her Highness Sheikh Moza is playing a big role in this. And I will start telling you about myself and my story as an entrepreneur, and then we will go I'll give you an idea about the project and how we are encouraging women entrepreneurship. I started my career 10 years ago. When I graduated, my family, or as any family in the Middle East, or in Qatar, sorry, they didn't want, their daughter to become just a teacher. So, and I didn't want to become a teacher. I don't feel myself, I don't see myself as a teacher. But I thought like I just wanted to start, working somewhere where I can gain experience, start building relation and network. And I've seen that the market is changing. By that time, we had the investment climate in Qatar was very unencouraging. It was under development. The security market I think we were having just 5 companies listed. So I worked with a company called Qatar Ladies Investment Company. And the name was really, everyone asked us everywhere about it. How Qatar Ladies Investment Company, it's an initiative that was driven under Her Highness. She wanted to create a place where women can come and get advisory for, to manage their wealth. And I was certified as advisor, and I started seeing women. The interesting thing, I'll just take you through a very small calculation. In the Islam, women inherit half of what men inherit. And we, women are 2/3. So we eventually we own 50% of the wealth in the Middle East. And when I sat with, women in Qatar, started, taking them through how they should manage their funds and their money. The interesting thing, no single woman could take decision in her wealth and in her money. So they always want to go back to their husbands, brothers, or fathers who do that. So I was like, as an entrepreneur, I thought like I have to find a solution. So I went to Saudi Arabia and I found a very interesting businesswomen who were really managing their own businesses without license because the government didn't give them at that time. They can't own businesses. So 40 of them, I met them in one day. I signed a very big, portfolio, and I came back to Doha and I started managing their wealth, from Doha, going back and forth. But I learned a very good lesson that the culture really play a big role. In Saudi Arabia, women were more educated. The kind of women that I met were all, they came to the US and Europe and they took their, degrees from these markets. But in Qatar, women are more into their family, and the culture was not helping. So I thought that we will need some time to get there, We were lucky that, Her Highness invested heavily in opening a huge campus for universities. We have today 5 of American universities in different sectors. We have Cornell in medical. We have Virginia for design. We have Carnegie Mellon for business. And we have so many universities. Education have changed. Women have their attitude towards their businesses and their career have changed. So after a few years, I started getting really good, clients, and I was, alhamdulillah, at that time also the market was changing. So I started the asset management division in our company, which was the first licensed asset management division. We launched 2 funds, equity funds, and then we started the investment banking department. And after 6 years, which I planned that, I would quit and start my own business. I started 3 businesses. One of them was in health and beauty. The other one was in investment advisory. And the third one, which is very close to my heart, was in publishing. In publishing, I was not able to start a company in Qatar because you can't get a publishing license. So I started a company in Dubai, Media Zone, and then also another company in Lebanon where the production is more quality and also creative is available. So, and I started managing this company from Qatar, going back and forth. But it was a very good experience. I did it with my own money, family money also helped. My family helped me. Also, no knowledge as the lady for chocolate said, you have to read a lot. You have to really to impress people that you talk to. I've learned it the hard way, but it was very exciting and exercise where you really know a lot and you become a player in a market. After that, I was looking for funding because this project cost a lot, and we had three bad years. And the publishing, you depend on advertisers, and advertisers were holding their budgets. So I had to look for funding. So I went to an initiative called Silatik in Qatar, which is created by Her Highness again to create employment and create jobs in the Middle East. And I told them, listen, you have to help SMEs because we are the ones who create jobs and help create jobs. I have a very good plan for you where we can build a model where we can help SMEs to grow in the Middle East rather than you go and just give money and help people in micro projects. Let's have an equity fund where we can invest in small and medium enterprises and help them to grow, where later on they will become the biggest employers and this is, if we go back to the US, we find that SMEs I think they employ almost 40% of the population. So they like the model. And I was lucky to meet Mr. Skander, the brother of Layla. And he said, you know what, I'm working with the government. We are today, the government of Qatar are planning to launch an SME authority to help SME and entrepreneurs develop in Qatar. So I want you to work with me in this project. And I told him, okay, this is something very close to my heart. I am an entrepreneur. I know exactly what entrepreneurs need, and I will be there to help the government. And because I was an entrepreneur, I was offered at the same time to work with the Goldman Sachs. They were planning to open a division for women wealth for the Middle East, and they wanted me to head this division. And I sacrificed this because I wanted to do something for entrepreneurship and for SMEs in Qatar and also for the Middle East. So today, as I mentioned, money is not an issue, education is not an issue, but I think it's about how to put everything together. And even in the US today, we find lots of entrepreneurs struggle to start, and where they can find themselves and how they can find themselves, and how can they really commercialize their ideas and take them forward. And the point is, what we did in Enterprise Qatar, it's a new venture, a new entity or agency. The decree by His Highness was signed just 2 months ago. We put together all the plan, and we are going to give 4 kind of resources for entrepreneurs, or 4 kinds of support. The first one is the funding. The funding, we will help entrepreneurs with 2 kinds of funding, either through debt or through equity. Through the debt, we managed to come with a product to the commercial banks, where the entrepreneurs, when they come to them, they give them funding if they are approved by EQ, which is us. We will sit with the entrepreneurs, find out if they have really valid ideas, and we will help them to commercialize their ideas. And when they become able to be funded, we send them to the banks. And the banks, even we made their job easier, where we give them different kind of structures. If a woman or an entrepreneur goes to them, if they want to buy a franchise, there is a special product. If they want to start, they want to have a working capital, they can have even a product to be sold by the banks. And the other funding element is the equity. We are also launching 2 kinds of funds. One of them is a startup fund, where any startup or any entrepreneur can go and just ask for funding, and again we'll take them through the process. The other one is the SME fund, where we are going to invest in SMEs who have potential to grow regionally and internationally later. The other kind of support is business support services. We started this program. We have different programs under this element. We started an entrepreneurship program, which started last month, and it starts with a business plan competition. We received almost 300 applications. We were impressed in Qatar to have such kind of amount of people who want to start their own businesses. After this exercise, we will we will give them access to startup fund, and then we will incubate them within an incubation center that will be launched next month. Also, we became more proactive, especially for women, because people criticize me that I am a woman and I'm giving more support for women. But I think women are they are more persistent, and they really want to start. If they want to start their business, they are really committed and they want to make it happen. So because we have a very nice school for design, which is Virginia Commonwealth, we have today almost 200 for the graduates who didn't start their own businesses in design. So we are starting also an fashion incubation center to incubate those young people who want to start their career or their businesses in fashion. So through this incubation center, we will help entrepreneurs to start their own businesses in design and in fashion design. The other thing is managerial advisory, where we're gonna give entrepreneurs access to different kind of advisory, legal, accounting, etc. And the most important thing also is mentoring and coaching. So it will be all supported and provided in Qatar. The other thing also, we have the training and development. And training and development element is very interesting because we are running different programs. We are going to support the Injaz Al-Arab. It's already founded in Qatar. It's for the junior people and people in the schools. And we have also another program we've set with different universities in Qatar, and we discussed with them to build entrepreneurship centers within their new campuses. And we are going to support those centers for entrepreneurs, and it will be the pipeline creation for us. So later on, we're going to receive those entrepreneurs coming from those universities. And also, we have another program for women who are employed and who want to start their own businesses. They can come directly to us. So, and the fourth element is the policy. We are working on changing different policies. One of them is, to license women, to give women to work from their homes. So women will be able to have their own license and will be able to get funding, and will be able also to get kind of advisory support from us without having them going to start their own business in an office, etc. So this is in general what we are doing in Qatar today. We have a lot to do, but we are starting today, and hopefully we can next year, if we are going to meet again, we can talk about our accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These have all been very, very exciting talks, and very interesting to hear about all these different resources. Just to pull it together, it seems like we're talking about resources at the local level, at the national level, at the regional level, and then at the international level. Before I open it up to questions, I just wanted to turn to Nadare Shamlou, who's a senior advisor at the World Bank. She's here, and I thought it would be great to hear from her a little bit about the international resources that the World Bank has to offer women. So there's a mic.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this wonderful program.
Excuse me, Andrew, is the mic
Can
on?
you hear me? Can you hear me well? Yeah. As I was introduced, I'm a senior advisor at the World Bank, and I have been working on gender issues for the last 9-10 years. Fascinating work, and much more importantly, I've been working with women entrepreneurs, which has given me a lot of energy and passion to move on. And I think the group that came here today is just a great sample of what you can see or what we can find in the MENA region. And the stories have been fascinating. Thank you. I think this is probably relevant. Well, you asked me about what we do at the World Bank. First of all, we have done quite a few studies that show really the strength of the existing, I would say, stock of women entrepreneurs in the region. We are also, of course, promoting policies that would, or strengthening policies that would promote more women's entrepreneurship. I would like to say something that contrary to what many people may think about the Middle East, that perhaps women are not as empowered, or for instance women maybe in microfinance. One of the striking findings that we have had at the World Bank is that actually the women entrepreneurs in the Middle East are much more at the medium to very large scale, and they easily, I mean, it was very, I would say, counterintuitive, and also very much in contrast to other regions where women-owned businesses tend to be more in the micro scale. But we found that this was very much prevalent in the Middle East, and that the women were actually across all sectors. And today you saw again, a good sample of those. They were across all sectors. They were almost as old and as sophisticated, if not more sophisticated, than male-owned businesses, and that they actually exported much more. They were much more global than even some of the average male-owned businesses. So in other words, the findings supported that what we knew about women-owned businesses was actually something very wrong, and so I'm happy to report this, and I would like to say that we very much are interested in deepening this analysis. But then going beyond just the diagnostic tools, we of course we are very much intent of making sure that wherever we have policies, wherever we are sort of like advising our governments, that we try to reduce the barriers that women face. And here it is very important to note that the barriers that women face are not usually the barriers that we think they face. First of all, the barriers that we have been able to identify or to see differ very much from country to country. And within each country, they are, again, very much different. Sometimes women have actually better access than men do. Men face some barriers. But I would like to say that when you look at sort of like the generic barriers that women face, as Noura was mentioning, it's not necessarily just the money, it's not necessarily education. The women are educated. In fact, in the Middle East, you will find that the number of women students in universities across all sectors, I mean, it's not just that women go and study history or some of these non-marketable or non-hard sectors. They are actually across all sectors. They are in, engineering more at a higher rate than they are, for instance, in European countries. But nonetheless, so education is of course a very important, it's an important factor. But I think going beyond that, it's not money, it's not necessarily finance. There are other barriers, and the other barriers are very interesting. It's access to information, as some of you were mentioning today, because without access to information, and certainly many of the countries in the Middle East, they don't publish regularly, inflation or any other kind of really hard data. So it's very difficult for women to assess risk. And today, this morning, we were talking about how do you assess risk. Without information, it's not possible to really assess risk very well, and women may be more at a danger of being overwhelmed with unnecessary risk. And this brings me to my second point, is that how do men deal with risk, with such risk? Well, networks are very important. Networks are the area where people exchange informal information. They inform themselves about what's happening. And most of these networks are still, and to a large extent, still male-dominated. So when women don't have access to these networks, they don't have access to this sort of information. And therefore, they are perhaps a little bit more at the, I would say, at the receiving end of whatever is happening in terms of changes in the economy, changes in various, circumstances. So I think what was mentioned here today again and again, building networks, whatever networks there are, among business women, among professional women, it's very, very critical to have that access to information that is really important for managing one's risk, reducing failure rates, finding new opportunities or understanding markets. And the third point that I would like to mention, that was also again said today, is the access to markets, because without markets you can't grow, and finding new ways, and particularly the issue of procurement, state procurement, is really critical. It's really critical at any point in time, and I think that's an area where women, because state procurement is a steady, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. I mean, the state, the government always needs paper, always needs, I don't know, pens, always needs it. So it's a very important part that women really get a foothold in that market, and that one can, for instance, let's say, promote or find a way to train women to bid for these activities. But having said that, I think women bring very important perspectives, and we saw today not only that the women were very successful businesswomen, but that they came to this to their businesses through perceiving a specific need in their societies, and wanting to commercialize, to fill that gap, to fill that need. And I think women perhaps are a little bit better at doing this, and I think one needs to capitalize, because we hear the problems that happen. We are closer to the, I mean, whichever class, whichever, socioeconomic class, but we're still closer to the problems of the society, and therefore we are perhaps better capable, or, I mean, women are better capable to understand where the gaps in the societies are, and where perhaps the business opportunities are. And I don't want to take too much of your time, because I'm sure that there are many, many questions, but it's been a very fascinating session. Both sessions have been very fascinating, and thank you very much for giving us such a great feast. Thank you.
Thank you, Nader. Thank you for that perspective. Okay, we do have about 15 minutes for questions, so please try to keep your questions brief, and if the panelists will keep their responses brief, then we can get a lot in. Hale.
Brief question to Laila. This has been such a successful venture. Has it been picked up in other cities in Egypt, and also whether in other countries in the region? Because as you were speaking and showing us the pile of garbage, I'm sure those of us who came from the region started remembering what sort of piles of garbage we have. That's for you. And then a quick question for Noura. I was curious what sort of obstacles you really faced as a young woman when you joined these various ventures and started expanding. You mentioned you had to go to Saudi Arabia and then came back. Just very short, brief answers, because we have just 15 minutes.
Our expertise looks good when I present it at a conference. But you go talk to, yeah, I'm marketing it. But when you talk to municipalities and governments, they hate it. They want the high-tech machines, especially when they have money, like in the Gulf. Why tell people in the Emirates to go backwards to where Cairo is? That's the logic. So no, it hasn't caught on. But we are part of networks, and we're transferring our know-how across community-based networks. However, now on another level, at the policy level, because it's the banks that give credit to the multinationals who come and destroy this knowledge. And so we're now networking to lobby the banks and those who insure the loans as well. It's a global monster. And so it's fortunate that we are educated. We read, we understand issues, and we now are lobbying for this, believe it or not, with the climate change people, because this reduces carbon footprint. You do not have to incinerate, and you do not landfill, and landfill gases contribute to 7% of global warming. Now, what do my producers here know about that? So another reason, maybe at the grassroots level it hasn't caught on as much, is it does require, sadly, the expertise of highly educated women. The product design, the marketing, the packaging, the differentiation, the market segmentation. There's a whole bunch. Now these girls know it. They've grown to know it because we've mentored them. But if you ask them to come and explain it, no, they won't be able to do it. So in India, There's a huge network of self-employed women's associations doing that, not just with this and other emerging markets, but no, on an international level, nobody wants this.
Before you answer, Nora, I just wanted to ask Elizabeth, you told me about a project that you connected some of your corporations with people who are making paper out of recycled materials. You want to talk a little bit about that and
Sure.
some of the issues that they encountered?
So Leila also mentioned it's the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA. They have traditionally a lot of women in businesses in agriculture, and they've done fantastic work in that area as well as textiles. But they also have a lot of what they call the women paper recyclers, the rag pickers. They go through door to door collecting trash, go to the landfills collecting trash. But it's not trash, right? It is gold. It has value. And the question is how, because the government is starting to privatize this activity of recycling very actively and aggressively, what happens to the livelihood of these hundreds of thousands of women and their families? So one thing that SEWA started to do a few years ago was to create a pilot to take that recycled paper product in particular, once it's separated, and turn it into products that could be put onto the market. They're only working with about 125 women, so it's very small. We came in partnership with funding from the World Bank, actually, to develop this pilot into a marketable unit of SEWA. So we have involved the very senior levels from companies like Accenture and Ernst & Young and Staples, and coming in to develop, and the UN International Trade Center, to develop the capacity of this group to take the waste paper and turn it into products that meet the various requirements of corporations, so that it's a sustainable model, both in hygiene, in quality, in price, all those different points that have to be met. And then how do you replicate that? So that was our big issue. It's one thing to help this particular unit of SEWA, but how do we learn from the great work that's being done on a very large, small scale, but then also on a very large scale, so that it can be replicated over time and develop, taking that, going along the global value chain and the value add, so that they're not producing onesie, twosie products, but how do you shift that into a mass production model that results in income for those women in their communities?
Great, thank you. Nora, you were going to
Yeah.
talk about obstacles, yeah.
Obstacles, so many obstacles, and it changed throughout the time. When I started, the cultural obstacle was a very, very big obstacle. As I mentioned, my family didn't want me to go into something, that is investment, and it was a private company where they said you have to be employed by the government. You were going to have a pension, scheme without because it wasn't included in the private. So it took me really. I was really so stubborn with them that I have to do what I like, and then. After that, after 5 years, they said you took the right decision. We can see where you are and where the others are. The other obstacle is the culture outside. When you deal with even women, they don't take you seriously. They don't think that you can really give them a good advice. Plus, the cultural element where we were offering a very sophisticated product to people who are not sophisticated, who believes that their investment should be just in properties, and that's it. So the market was not ready at that time. So that's why when I went to a more sophisticated market like Saudi Arabia, things went really differently, and I did really very well. So after that, when I started my own business, the obstacles were so many. I was dealing with so many investors who really liked me and believed in me. And when you go to them with when you representing your own business, they don't take you seriously a lot. And I was really surprised with that. But you have to prove yourself. You have to do it again and again and prove yourself. Funding was a very big issue. As Hanan said, banks were asking so high collaterals, and also they are offering a very high interest rate. So this is what we did now in EQ to help entrepreneurs to not really go through this kind of difficult funding and risky funding. The other obstacle is, and today even I face as a woman, again, when Majdi wanted me to take over this project, he said, you are the only one because you have an entrepreneurial experience and investment banking experience. And the men were really against that because they think that a man should take, So it took me a while to prove to them that I can, and there was another man who was coming to take this job as well. But after 2 months, they started seeing the difference. So you have to prove yourself. You have to work hard really to prove yourself.
Thanks. Other questions? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, especially Laila and all of you. Looking at Noura, what do you import from all over the world, or what would you import from the United States or Africa? As I said in the first time in coffee, and I was lucky to go to Saudi Arabia. I was the first African woman to go to Saudi Arabia for business, and I was locked at the airport because no women went for business. So I'm just so happy that things have changed and the women are in business. So what can you import from here and Africa, looking at coffee, Arabs like coffee? And Leila, what can we do from America? We have so much plastic bottles. I can get into that because I'm used to it from Africa. So I can start it here so long as I know where I'm exporting to. Thank you.
What we export from here, in my beauty and health company, we have a trading, activities. We buy lots of, beauty products and health products that does not exist in the Middle East. And actually, we get also, even if they do exist, we get better prices from here. So this is what we do buy from here. Beside that, Africa, actually, we didn't have the chance to look into what can we be offered from there, from Africa. So
we don't want the United States to start sending us its electronic waste the way it has been to Ghana and China. However, we have pioneered in Cairo a safe electronic waste recycling venture at the community level, and it works. It requires strong NGO monitoring so that things don't leak out, because on the motherboard there's platinum and gold, and you don't want people to start smelting the way they do in Asia. So you have to have control. But who are our partners? It's Europeans. It's the Belgian company that wants to buy the motherboards from us and to recycle it safely, because we don't have that technology in the South. In the United States, it is still too easy to dump electronic waste. However, if there's something that we can teach the United States, it is how to valorize all the stuff that's going to landfill. And I know this is a very rich country, but gosh, listen to the stories about returned veterans. There are poor people in this country, and it's criminal to take away money from them. There's a new mindset that needs to be promoted here. We work with Kenya. The Ford Foundation started an Africa-wide enterprise visiting exchange visits, and Cairo is the recycling center of Africa. So for many years, we've been bringing South Africans and Kenyans, particularly. And we went to Kibera, the biggest slum in Africa, and set up a granulator now. But you see, it always stops at the policy level. The municipalities in Africa don't want their cities to claim that they're going for low-cost, labor-intensive, messy enterprises. They are unable to see how it can be cleaned up. Now, in South Africa, credit to them, they're raising it to the apartheid language discourse. They're saying, you municipal engineers are all white. This is economic apartheid. When you go for landfilling for the city, you're depriving my black boys from a livelihood. So my impression is that the argument will be won in South Africa, not in Cairo, although we have the most experience, but because the climate there and the political discourse allows us as Africans. So here's the importance of networking. You South Africans fight it on the political. When you want the technical, come to us in Cairo. You Kenyans, blah, blah, and so on.
Amy, quick question. Yeah.
Question about failure. In the United States, there's quite a lot of talk in the entrepreneurship world about failing fast, failing wisely, right? Learning, moving forward, advancing. I'm curious, especially to the international people, what happens with failures, and have you had them? Have you overcome them? How is that perceived?
Quick answers, please. Yeah.
Yeah, failure is the first thing that any entrepreneur should face. You know, you should fail at the beginning, and we all failed, and this is the way we learn. So through EQ, we are bringing in different kind of education and knowledge to entrepreneurs, that you don't be afraid of failure, and failure is the recipe of success. So you have to go through this, and we went through this. Yeah, throughout my experience, I failed so many times, and I succeeded so many times. So it's I think it's a global thing. It's not just something belong to entrepreneurs in the US. But actually, and with me, with my own experience, I as an entrepreneur, I saw opportunities. But actually, although we went into a calculated risk, but even the market was not really helping. So in the United States, you find the angel investors, you find even policy is helping you. None of that was exist 5 years ago in Qatar, for instance, and it was really a very big obstacle for me to where I had to invest more money and more time into my ventures to make them really succeed. So now it's changing a lot, alhamdulillah, but it will take time even. But failure is there, and anyone, especially new entrepreneurs, they have to go through this through the learning curve to learn how to succeed.
Mary, any insights on failure? Other than what Susan B. Anthony told us, that failure is impossible.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
In social enterprises, you invest a lot more than money, and that's what saves you from failure, because the resilience of the poor in putting up with downtimes, the social capital, and all of the community stuff that you invest into the enterprise save you when you are about to fail. So it's not just about money, and that's why social enterprises are so much more dynamic than straight Nora type.
Elizabeth, and any thoughts about failure?
I do it all the time.
Well, I hate to end on a note of failure, but I think what we're hearing is that failure is actually productive and expected. So it's a new way of thinking about failure. Okay, please join me in thanking the panel and welcoming Tammy back to the podium. You can just stay here.
Through a lot.
Just to make sense, because we don't have too much time.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very interesting. You know, to form a market that doesn't exist. You know, so 10 years. It's like.
Although, actually, we may want to sit down so we can see, because I think Tammy has some great slides here.
It's right here.
Yes, so we may want to.
Well, thank you very much. I know we've had a full morning, not only in time, but also in thought. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to think about. And so I'll keep my remarks certainly brief, but I hope to the point. You know, women and entrepreneurship is a subject that all of us have expressed passion about today. And certainly my thanks to the Woodrow Wilson Center, to Hala and Sonia, for what I think you have done is brought together some very important women from around the world, and will make some important contacts that we are grateful to you for. That passion that we've expressed came through in all of us, and certainly in me, it's through an entrepreneurial family that, from very humble beginnings, passed down this craft of basket making through generations, and this gift of entrepreneurial spirit really gives us, and as those of you today who talked about being entrepreneurs or thinking about being entrepreneurs, it creates more than a job. It creates a way of life and a way of thinking about life. We've all met those people whose glasses are half empty, but entrepreneurs seem to always be half full. And it's that spirit that I think has been the backbone of the strong years of the United States, and certainly something that the United States has to export. And all of you are doing that in that spirit of entrepreneurship. I'm particularly humbled by the relationships that I've built over the past several years with women business owners and political activists, specifically in the Middle East. That has come through my role as the chair of the Arab Women's Leadership Institute based in Amman, Jordan, as the, as the chair of that board. I must tell you, I've met so many impressive women from the Middle East, very similar to the women that we have been able to meet today, who are really making a difference, as you are making a difference, in your region and the world. We were established in 2008 by what we call IRI here, which is the International Republican Institute, led by an 8-member board, of which I am the only American. Women on this board from Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Morocco, the United States, and the West Bank, Gaza. Our offices are in Amman, Jordan, and I expect to bring everyone to the wonderful chocolate factory. We can find you in Jordan. We all want samples to try, and we'll spread throughout the region of the Middle East. But what we really do in Amman at this Institute is our mission is to strengthen the democratic development of women in the Arab world, and we train and educate women by providing skills, resources, and networking opportunities necessary to succeed as not only certainly in the business world, but also as elected or appointed officials, civil servants, civil society, and community leaders. One of our students that participated is with us today. Siwar, if you'd stand up, from Tunisia. She started all these problems or successes in the Middle East. We met in Jordan at the Dead Sea maybe a year and a half ago, I think. And so she can talk to you about some things. But women who go through this training in all walks of life really come from a business-related background. So the things that you're doing to make a difference carry on generationally and provides great hope in the Middle East. I talked about woman Lily Feidi from the Gaza, works with local, works with local civil society organizations to advance women there. And of course, I think that I talked last night about our dear friend in Egypt, Nihad, who makes a difference in empowering women, and also she works in sexual harassment areas as well. But over the course, getting back to today, we've discussed obstacles that women face becoming entrepreneurs. Being fully involved in civil society alone sometimes can be a challenge. Advantages to working for yourselves, resources available to help all of us become more successful businesswomen. We conclude this program on women and entrepreneurship as we continue to watch in just amazement in many, many ways. I apologize. I didn't mean to do that. Let me step back. To think about the importance to complete this picture of potential power in the Middle East, and really it's something that Mr. Domes you saw in his report this morning. When America, back in the 40s and 50s, started putting their women to work, allowing women to go to work, that is when the U.S. economy really took off. It was after World War II. Many of our men were killed in World War II, so women, or they were off fighting, women had to go to work in the factories because there was a labor shortage. But guess what? we really didn't go back home. And so as a result, women have been involved in the workforce. And really it's that if countries that do not fully engage their women economically lose 1/2 of their resources in the country. And so it's sometimes from an economic perspective, we can make the argument about the engagement of women from an economic standpoint. It just makes sense versus economically. As with anything in life, there's good news and bad news. So we start a little bit with the not so good news. Compared to other parts of the world, women in the Middle East face tremendous obstacles in all walks of life, political, economic, and social. And while Middle Eastern women are more represented in the labor force, and we heard wonderful stories today, now more than ever, they're able to receive more education, have an increase in political participation. And I don't know, some of you may have seen, there's a report I have here from the Freedom House. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's women's rights in the Middle East and North Africa. Just came out 2010. But on average, only 28% of the adult female population in the Middle East is economically active. And that's the lowest rate in the world. And so what you're doing makes such an important difference in such an important part of the world. Research by the World Bank shows that in the Middle East, where substantial investment has reduced the gender gap in education, in the economic sector, the gender gap remains the widest in the world. And this is from the World Economics Forum's 2010 gender gap. Women in the Middle East still do not hold significant or even close to equal amounts of political or government positions. Many times can't win seats without the quotas or those family connections. Once they're in office, sometimes we have seen, at least our experiences, they tend to be relegated to what is called women's issues, and really continue to face extreme forms of discrimination, sexual harassment, and so forth, all the things that we know. And while women have entered the workforce, entrepreneurship will remain limited in the region until those people, like we talked today, can address such issues policy-wise fairly and justly. To paraphrase former First Lady Laura Bush, lasting prosperity can only come from countries where women are accorded full and equal rights and opportunities. And certainly our current Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, some of you, I think, met with her in the last couple weeks, said in the region, supporting women and girls is both the right thing to do and also the smart thing to do. And I want you to know that many of your sisters here in the United States stand with you to do all that we can to help advance your causes, and in return, thank you for all the things that you have taught us, both about ourselves and about what we don't know. So the good news is, compared to a decade ago, we're making great strides. I got an enormous amount of inspiration and hope and a good sense from our conversations today. Some very strong women that make an incredible difference in their own lives and families, but also in our future. In the business sphere, as you heard today, more women in the Middle East are joining the workforce and starting their own business. I met an incredible young woman. Actually, she came to the U.S. through a partnership program through the University of Toledo, young woman from Jordan, who started her own business. She brought a collection of 120 women together who make crafts. And basket making is a craft, so I'm very interested in that. Beautiful jewelry, beautiful clothes, beautiful things. And 4 times a year, they get together in an exhibit hall. And I was so blessed on my last trip. It happened to time it up and was there, and I came home with more jewelry than I needed, but nonetheless, you see those examples of making a difference not only in her own family's life, but in the 120 women's lives, which then perpetuates a spirit that is really what has brought us all together here. So Women have demonstrated to the world their ability to organize on issues that are really important to us, and starting in our communities. Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, women's rights activists have been particularly successful in lobbying their governments to reform family laws and implement new protections for women. So these are real examples of public policy progress that are being made in the MENA region that improves opportunities for women in the region, for girls in the region, and quite frankly, for the countries themselves as they benefit from the resourcefulness that women bring to the economy. The revolutions, I must say, across the Arab world that we've all watched unfold, some of you a much closer view of it all than others, have presented both opportunities and challenges for women and men alike in the Middle East. And as we watch undemocratic regimes fall in the Middle East and others scramble to implement reform demanded by the people, I am reminded about the importance of the voice of business leaders in the political debate. I also marvel at the courage demonstrated by the women of Egypt, Tunisia, and other countries in the Middle East who have added their voices to the call for freedom. You know, it has been, I must say, on a personal note, a privilege to spend time with all of you, to learn from you, and listen about your life. You make contributions that make a difference to my life and to other women's lives here in America in ways that I don't think we express as well to you as we should. I'm filled with optimism and hope for the future of Arab women. I mean, truly at this time of unprecedented change in the region, the role of businesswomen and female political activists is critical in transforming future generations to come. And let me just say, your participation in civil society is of course, as you well know, making a difference in your own country. But I hope you know, and I don't think as Americans we express this well, you're not only making a difference in your region, but as women in America sit and watch what is happening in the Middle East, you're making differences in the world. And I think it's maybe fair to say, maybe for the first time, you as women in the Middle East have the attention of the world. The world is watching you. So to be able to come here today and have success stories like to be able to repeat and talk about, I just can't say enough about the impact that you are making and the difference in the world. So for that, I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tammy. You, as a woman who comes from the region, I think we were 4 speakers here, and if you in the audience, you praised us so much. Can you imagine if we had 120 women from the region sitting, you know, we would have gotten probably 5 times standing ovations. I would like to thank you all, especially my friends who came from the region. It's not an easy time to leave your countries and come. On behalf of Sonia and myself and the Wilson Center, we would like to extend our thanks to you and wish you a safe trip back, and hope to see you soon here, inshallah, very soon. Thank you once again.